Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 708. My opponent kicked off with e4. I went with c5, the Sicilian. He goes knight f3. Now I play d6, which in my case means that I intend to play the classical Sicilian. There are other ways to get into it. I know someone who regularly plays knight to f6 but transposes into the classical Sicilian. But this is kind of the standard way of getting there. Anyway, my opponent goes d4, going for the open Sicilian main line. And after the exchange, I play knight f6, attacking the pawn, which he defends. And now I get in knight c6. So this is the classical Sicilian, just bringing the two knights out, not waiting to play the move a6, which would be the Najdorf, or g6, the dragon. It's a pretty flexible setup, but it has a few downsides here. I will illustrate them. I mean, I don't know if I should call them downsides, but interesting characteristics. Let's see. So white plays bishop g5. This is the most challenging move here and the most common response. So I play e6. So I want, at this point, if he takes my knight, I'm planning to take back with the queen. And now the normal way for white to continue here is queen d2 and castles queenside, and that leads to interesting play. My opponent instead goes for kingside castling, goes with bishop d2. e2, which is okay, and I went with bishop d7. I'm still keeping my queen here ready to take back the knight with the queen, and keeping the bishop here ready to defend the pawn. So when the bishop goes to e7, you always have this choice to make between taking the knight with the pawn or taking with the bishop, and sometimes you need to take with the pawn in order to keep this d-pawn protected. That's I guess one of the downsides of this setup here, is this weakness on the e-pawn, the d-pawn rather. So there's different things that black can try here. My opponent just castled here, but I wanted to show some of the other lines and illustrate some of these themes. So he could just take the right away, and I said I was intending to take back with the queen. G takes f6 actually is playable here too. But taking with the queen is actually a pawn sack. So he can now go knight d to b5. And let's see, I would castle queenside here. That prevents his knight from coming into c7. If we back up, he was threatening a pretty nasty check here, as well as threatening on d6. So castle queenside. And now he can take this pawn with check. And now the move here, the best move for black is actually just to move the king out of the way, not to trade and give up this good bishop, but just to give up the pawn. So this is a pawn sack line, but at this point the knight has to move again. It can't be defended with the pawn. You can just take that off, and there's this threat of moving the bishop and getting a pin going on this knight, which is I don't know if that wins right away, but I think it's pretty nasty. So the knight has to go back. And then you develop this bishop with tempo, bishop to c5, looking at the f2 pawn. So this is all defensible, but this is plenty of activity for black. The point is that black actually has more than enough compensation for the pawn. So, you know, you have to kind of be willing to go for these pawn sack lines. One other way of playing here, if we back up to this point, instead of taking the bishop right away, white could play with knight d to b5, going after the pawn right away. And now I can defend the pawn with queen b8. And then, let's see, a4 to secure the knight on that square so it's not subject to tempo. And then a6, kicking it away, is a normal way. So I continue, the knight goes back to a3, and then I can develop the bishop here. And now I can take back on this side I can take back the knight with the bishop at this point, because my queen is defending that pawn. So that's one way to play it. And then another way to play, after queen b8, instead of a4 defending the knight, he could also try taking my knight here. And at this point, I can't take back with a queen. He's deflected my queen by this attack on d6, so I am forced to go into this line where I've got to take back with the pawn. But, well, he castles, and I get a rook on the open file. Oh, I guess I kick the knight first, and then put the rook on the g file. So what does black have here? It looks like it might be horrible for black with the king stuck in the middle, but black has open lines. This pawn structure in the center here is fairly safe, and black has the bishop pair. So it turns out this is a playable position for black as well. And these are the kind of positions that sometimes turn up when you're playing the classical Sicilian, so you need to have a way of dealing with them. So just thought I'd point that out, very typical play. Let's see, my opponent castled here, and we're just out of book at this point. I play a6, that eliminates some of these lines with the knight coming to b5. He goes a4. I'm not so sure about that move, but, well, it does maybe stop me from playing b5 and harassing his knight going after the pawn. So that's reasonable. I go bishop e7 now. Now that I've got a6 in, this bishop e7 move is playable, I think. Let's see, he goes king h1. So king h1 maybe is a bit of a mistake. The chess engine wants to go knight b3 and just open up this line of the queen onto the d pawn. So once again threatening to take the knight. And if I take back with the bishop, grab the pawn, so I'd probably play queen c7 here. And it seems like an okay position where white has that typical kind of opening advantage. This king h1 is a slight mistake. He's preparing f4. So it's not a bad idea, but somehow starts to give away that opening advantage. So I just castle here. I don't see f4 as such a huge threat. And at this point, I'm trying to figure out a way to get in e5. There's kind of a rule in these Sicilians. If you can play e5 and your opponent can't play f5 because of whatever, then that's a good exchange for black. Kind of frees up black's position a little bit, whereas if white manages to get an f5 in response to e5, then it shuts down this bishop and leaves black a little bit cramped. So that's what I'm trying to do. So I start with this exchange, and then I realize that well, e5 is not looking so great right here. Yeah, I think he just exchanges and wins the e-pawn. That's what happens here. So I fall back to plan B. I kick his bishop. Bishop drops back to h4, and then I develop my bishop to a good square. Also bringing another defender to the defense of the d-pawn and just holding off on those pawn pushes for the moment. He goes bishop f3, defending his pawn and opposing my bishop. I go queen to c7, getting the queen out of the way. I'm ready to bring a rook over to the d file. And now he pushes on with e5. And this seems to be a second mistake. The chess engine wants to play with e5. Rather, with f5, which is interesting. Sometimes f5, while I still have the pawn here, is not so great. Because usually the light-squared bishop is on this diagonal, either on c8 or d7. But I've moved the bishop off that diagonal, and so now there's not a defender of this pawn other than the f-pawn. So say I play rook to c8, he can take, I take, and I've got this somewhat weakened pawn structure here in the center. It looks like that might be okay for white. Hey, it's about an even position. After e5, it seems like the evaluation has swung to black's favor. So I take, which is the right response. He takes, and then I played rook f to d8. So that's actually the wrong rook. As I say, whatever rook you use, it's the wrong rook. But rook a to d8 is the much stronger move, and it keeps an advantage. I mean, one point is I don't really want to move this knight and go in for a bunch of exchanges right at this point. I think that actually ends up losing a pawn. So one of the rook moves is correct, and but this was the second best rook move. So anyway, he could have exploited this slight inaccuracy by playing queen to f4. It's not like it results in a bad position for black. It results in a position that's about even, but I had the advantage before and would keep it with the other rook. So this leads to a complicated sequence similar to what happened in the game. Say knight d5 here, where the knight and the queen are defending the bishop here. After some exchanges, I have to throw in bishop takes h4 at this point because he's just opened up the his battery on the f-pawn. Let's see, he can throw in bishop takes e6 and then grab this bishop, and I can throw in rook to d2. And white is up a pawn, but I have active pieces, and I'm probably going to get that pawn back because his pawns are a bit weak here, and they're already under pressure. So the engine rates this as about even, so that's how black should have responded when I played rook fd8. Instead, and that's also why the other rook would be stronger, because there wouldn't have been that pressure on f2, which gained a tempo for white. So anyway, I went rook fd8, so the wrong rook. But then he moved his queen the wrong way. He moved his queen to c4. And this looks good at first. There's this pin on my bishop. But with the rook here, I can play knight to d5 anyway. And I could also have played queen takes e5. I wasn't really sure about this, but I checked it out with the chess engine. And queen takes e5 is playable here as well. Let's see, he can take... And then instead of taking back, the point is to play rook to c8 and get the bishop back this way, exploiting the pin. So I didn't have to worry about losing the c-pawn there. That was the point I was missing. So anyway, I played, instead of playing queen takes e5 here, I played knight to d5. And then we get some exchanges. He takes here first. I could also have taken with the knight in this position, but I took with the queen. This keeps an advantage. And let's see, he takes off the knight. I take back with the bishop, and he takes with the bishop, and I take with the rook, and everything is fine. There was one point here that I was talking about during the game. I guess I kind of glossed over it here. Let's see, if he played knight takes d5, I was calculating the sequence outlined in the game. I was planning to take e takes d5, and this turns out to be correct. The queen has to move, and queen f4 is the best place. And then I have time to trade off this bishop and grab the pawn. So this does turn out okay for me. And the line I wasn't sure about, I said, well, what happens if he grabs the pawn? I was kind of misunderstanding something, because I knew that I had this rook takes, but I was thinking, well, maybe this would be a problem, but it's not. This, for some reason in my mind, I was seeing this rook as being undefended, but the bishop is still here on c6 defending the rook. So there's no problem in this line at all. So anyway, just to clear up that little point I was talking about during the game. So he didn't try taking the knight here. He took the bishop first, and I took back with the queen. It was also possible to take with the knight there. And let's see, he took on d5, I take back. But all of these lines lead to an advantage for black now. Let's see, he takes with the bishop, I take with the rook. And now he runs over with the queen to f4, gets some pressure on the f-file. But, well, I just have more active pieces and a better pawn structure. So this is actually a winning advantage at this point. Let's see, let's count the pawns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, the pawns are even. So my advantage is strictly in the position, the better pawn structure and the active pieces. So queen to c7, I start putting pressure on his pawns. He has to find ways to defend. Let's see, I bring a rook over to d8. Get both my rooks in the game. Tries rook to f2. And now rook 8 to d7. Yeah, I was worried that he would triple on this, and so I wanted to be able to have this rook free to roam, the other rook free to roam. Let's see, and he went c4, which is losing a pawn. Let's see, he could have tried h3. This is the chess engine recommendation, but after rook to d4, I'm still winning a pawn. But anyway, c4 goes down quicker because I have this simple reply, rook to d4, and I don't know, maybe he was planning to cancel that. I have to have rook to d4. That's right. I was thinking about rook to c5 for a while, but he can defend with the pawn. So anyway, yeah, rook to d4 is a much stronger move than rook c5. So he moved his queen back. I grabbed the c-pawn. Now things are all even on this side. I have an extra pawn over here, and I still have weaknesses to attack. Let's see, he tried rook e to f1. I just brought a rook down. I'm going to trade off one pair of rooks, and I should be able also to round up this pawn as well. So he resigned at this point. I think it's a little bit premature to resign, honestly, but the chess engine does evaluate this as -2, so I'm basically 2 pawns up, the engine thinks. So I guess I would likely go on to win, but with all this force on the board, I can still I can still make mistakes. Anyway, he resigned, and that's how it ended. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.